Hello, welcome to Parallel Painting with Julia. Today we're going to be painting the Aspen Looking Up. We're going to be using a 16 by 20 canvas, and we are using for our brushes any small teeny tiny brush will do, size 0 or smaller. And then you can use a size 7 to 12 round. Anywhere along there will work just fine. And then we're going to be using this 1-inch flat brush. For the colors, I'm going to be using LIQUITEX Basics paint, and I'll leave a link down below. And we're going to be using white, black, cerulean blue, cadmium yellow light, cadmium yellow deep, and cadmium red. Next, I just have some paper towel and some water. I'm going to be walking you through this entire painting step by step. You don't need any experience. This is acrylic paint. And we're going to start off with our 1-inch flat brush. So go ahead and dip that in your water to loosen up the bristles, and then you're going to dab it on your paper towel to remove any excess water. We're going to start off just doing the background, and we're going to do a gradient, so fading from light blue to a darker blue. So whenever I am using white in a gradient, I like to start off just using the pure color first. So the first thing I'm going to do is take my 1-inch flat brush, and I'm just going to grab a bunch of my cerulean blue, and I'm going to go over here to the bottom of my canvas, and I'm going to start going back and forth. I'm using the flat side of my brush, and I'm doing horizontal brush strokes. So something you want to keep in mind is the angle of your brush. So if you go straight on perpendicular to your canvas, you can see you can kind of dig paint off. If you keep the handle, the end of your handle close to the canvas, then what that's going to do is make a smoother, flatter brush stroke. So don't be shy, really get in there, and you're going to use a lot of paint. So a gradient is where we are fading from a dark color to a light color, or a light color to a dark color. So we're going to be doing a gradient, and I'm just doing the horizontal brush strokes, and notice I'm going all the way to the end of the canvas rather than starting in the middle. If I start in the middle, it's going to create more texture. So I'm not going for that, but if you are, by all means, you can get in there and create that texture. So I'm going to go about halfway down before I start to add in white. And another thing you can do to create a gradient is you can do a little bit of a wash. So a wash is where you use water to thin out the paint. So I'm going to come about halfway up here, and I've got just water now. And I'm going to come on up into my thick blue paint, and I'm just brushing back and forth, and that's a wash. So if you wanted a more kind of watercolor look to it, what you can do is just use water to thin out the paint so that up top it can be lighter, and down here it can be the thicker, darker paint. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to clean out my brush. So I'm going to wipe it on my paper towel first, and that's going to keep my water cleaner longer. And I'm going to clean out my brush by pressing it hard against the bottom of the glass, spinning it in a circle, dab it on my paper towel. And then what you want to know is a little bit of pigment in your white is going to go a long way. So you want to start off just getting a teeny bit of blue, and you're going to mix that in with your white. So notice I'm starting off very, very, very light. And I'm going to go here to the top of my canvas, barely any blue, mainly white, because I want a really dramatic look. So again, I'm going back and forth. And I'm going to go down about 5-6 inches before I start to add more blue paint in. So I'm going to take just a little bit more blue now, and I'm going to mix that in with my white. And I just have this chunk here that's kind of missing paint, and I'm going to come right in there and start filling that in. And you want to work kind of quickly when you're doing a background like this, because acrylic paint dries very quickly. And if it's dry, then it's going to be harder to blend. So if you're really wanting it to blend nicely, you want to do it while it's wet. You can dip your brush in your water if you need a little bit of extra blending power. And you want to be thinking about your edges. If you want to wrap around the canvas with your edges, or if you want to paint all your edges one color, like black or red. So I like, this is a sky in the background, so I like a little bit of variation. So I've got some kind of whiter areas and some kind of dark blue streaks, and I'm going to go ahead and leave that because I kind of like the way that looks. So let's say you get to a point and it looks like you can see a clear line. All of a sudden it goes from dark blue to light blue, and you want to blend that together. All you want to do is keep brushing over that line. So I'm moving up into the white area and down into the blue area, and up into the white area and down into the blue area. And you can see that it starts to fade more and more and blend together more and more. So that's going to be it for our background. So right now what you can do is let this dry a little bit before we add in our aspen trees. If you're going to wrap around your edges, you can go ahead and paint your edges, the sides of your canvas, light blue, dark blue, all the way around. You can start off painting the top, and that way when it's dry you can flip it over and paint that bottom edge. So we're just going to wait until this dries a moment. We are back and we are ready to start the aspen trees. We're going to be using our 1-inch flat brush. So go ahead and clean that out in your water and dab it on your paper towel. And we are going to make sure that our canvas is at least most of the way dry. We're going to go ahead and grab white paint. So the 1-inch flat brush can be used in two ways. You can either turn it sideways and use the edge to make a thin line, or you can use the flat part like we did with the background and make a thick line. Even if I'm using the edge of the brush, if I press down really hard, I'm going to make a fat line. So if I'm trying to make a thinner line, I'm going to grab paint. I'm going to go into my canvas, and I'm going to have my aspen tree go all the way up to the top of the canvas. So I'm going to go to the bottom and I'm going to eyeball about center. Doesn't need to be perfect. And I'm going to use the edge of my brush to make a line. Keep in mind, this is not a pole, this is an aspen tree, so it doesn't need to be perfectly straight. The next thing I'm going to do is I want my aspen tree to appear that we're looking up at it. So in order to do that, it needs to be wide at the bottom and thin at the top. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my line I just made, and I'm going to go over about 2 inches using the edge of my brush and the white paint, and I'm going to lean in towards that first line I made. Then I'm going to go to the right and I'm going to do the same thing. So I'm going to go over about 2 inches, and then I'm going to lead in to the center. So it's going to take a little bit to get this kind of to where you want it. So first thing you're going to do is you're just going to fill it in. And that's going to help you better see what it is that you want to do. So keep in mind, so I'm trying to cover up this blue. If I hold my brush perpendicular and start in the middle, I'm going to kind of dig the paint off. So you want to lay it on a little bit thicker and get your tree filled in. If you're going for a very realistic look, you can mix a little bit of a color into your white, because aspen trees aren't necessarily true white, straight white, the white of the canvas. So you could add in a teeny tiny bit of yellow. You could have a teeny tiny little bit of black to do a little bit of a gray tree. Okay, so I have my tree started here now. I just want it to be a little bit more gradual right here. So it's going thin, and I'm going to start to just press down my brush a little bit harder to get it to lead into that thicker part of my tree. So you can spend just a minute kind of getting it to where you want it, going thick to thin. And keep in mind, it doesn't need to look super detailed at the top. In order to give the illusion that this is far away, we would actually want it to be more kind of fuzzy. So it's okay if it kind of fades into the distance and is a little bit fuzzy back there. So I'm going to make mine just a teeny tiny bit wider right here, just slightly. And that's about where I want it. So the next thing I'm going to do is I am going to start adding on a little bit of shadow. So in order to do that, I'm going to go ahead and take my brush, wipe it off on my paper towel here. I can clean it out in my water. And I am going to add on a little shadow. So actually I'm going to show you two ways that you can do this. So one way is you can add white to one side of your brush and a little bit of black to the other side of your brush. And you can start over here, pick a side you want the shadow on. I'm going to do my shadow on the right side. And I can drag my brush, and once it gets to where my tree is a little bit skinnier or thinner than my brush, that's where I want to stop. So if I want to blend that in more, I can go over it again, and you can kind of keep going over it and over it to blend it in. Adding in, if you want more black, you can dip into your black paint again. And the more you brush over it, the more it's going to blend in. You can even have your aspen tree go over the edge of your canvas here. So keep in mind, again, it is an aspen tree, not a pole, so you don't want it to look super even, but you also don't want it to look wavy, so you don't want to be kind of rocking your brush too much. So you can see we're starting to get the illusion that the tree is three-dimensional. So up here on this thinner part at the top, I'm going to use the edge of my brush to just add a little bit of shadow. And I'm lightly brushing over it there. So that's one way you can do the shadow. Another way you can do the shadow is you can take black, and you could even mix in a little bit of blue if you want. Little black, little blue. And you can use the flat part of your brush to do very light brush strokes. So you can see here on the side, I'm very lightly, barely touching, and that can create these kind of really thin lines. And you want to do them at a little bit of an angle. If you do them straight across, it's not going to look like we're looking up at the tree. So you want to do them at a little bit of an angle. So I'm going to come over here on the right side of my tree, and I'm very lightly going to go and add in. And so notice some of them I'm doing a little bit longer than others. So that's one way you can add in a shadow as well. Not one way is really better than the other. It's kind of up to you. You could even go in and add some white brush strokes from this side, going in that same kind of, and this brush stroke is so light. I'm very, very lightly touching the canvas, and notice the angle of my brush. It's not straight up, it's kind of leaning a little bit. So you can see we're starting to get the illusion here of the aspen tree. The next thing we're going to do is we are going to add in some branches. So we're going to drop off that 1-inch flattener water, and we're going to get out our 12 round, dip it in our water, dab it in our paper towel. And we're going to start off grabbing just some white paint. So how this brush works is if you press down really hard, you're going to get a really thick line. If you very lightly kind of just glide along the canvas, you'll get a very thin line. So you can kind of practice with that for a minute. And for branches, you just want to think of the letter Y, okay? And you always want to start off leading off of a branch or leading off of the tree trunk. You don't want to start out and come in. So I'm going to start down here at the bottom. The branches that are closest to the bottom are going to be bigger. So I'm going to go to the bottom of my canvas, and I'll go up about 5-6 inches, and I'm going to add in a letter Y. I'm going to have it bend up a little bit. And from there, we can add on another Y. And you can kind of go on adding on as many Ys as you want. So notice I press down a little bit harder at first, and then I slowly release the pressure. And that's going to give you that illusion of a branch. So now I'm going to go up the tree a couple inches, and I'll go over to the right. And I'll add in another little branch over there. And notice how I'm making them so they're not straight, but they're not wavy either. So they're somewhere in between. So you can kind of go straight and then maybe wiggle a little bit down and then wiggle a little bit up. Go up a couple inches, add one on the right. And the key is that you just, so once I start getting up here to the top too, I want to aim them more upwards at an angle, and that's going to help with the illusion. So the key is that you don't want them to look too contrived. So you don't want it to be like every inch there's another branch on the right, then another one on the left. You want it to look natural. So maybe there's two right next to each other. And anything that you think really matters right now, in the end, you're not going to really be able to tell. So you want to step back from your painting ever so often to get a new perspective on it. The painting's meant to be viewed from the wall, not right up next to you. And after you've been working on it for a while and staring at it, you really kind of lose sight of what it looks like. So the other thing you'll notice is I'm starting the branches. Some of them I'm starting from the middle of the aspen tree. And that's because branches grow all the way around an aspen tree. They don't just sprout out of the sides. You can have some of them sprouting out of the sides, but you want to kind of mix that up a little bit. And also keep in mind that they're going to get thinner and thinner as you get to the top. So the thickest branch is going to be down here at the bottom. So now you can use your baby brush if you want to, but I'm just doing very light pressure with this size 12 round. And I'm just adding in little branches. Maybe there's a little one on the bottom. If you do one that you don't like, don't worry about it, just leave it, because we're gonna go in and add in leaves. And when you do that, you can cover up any branches that you don't really care for. All right, so the next thing I'm going to do is add some shadows to these branches. So I'm going to take my brush, and you can just wipe it off on the side if there's any big, large globs of white paint. And I'm going to do my shadows. So you can either do your shadow in straight black, you could do it in gray, you can do it with a little bit of blue in it. So I'm going to go ahead and take this shadow, and I'm going to go to the bottom edge of each branch. So you can go a little bit over the white, and the paint should still be wet, so it should kind of blend right in. And so I'm just going along the bottom of the branches. So when I do that, it gives the illusion of a shadow. So So you can just go to each of your branches there. So if you do just straight black and straight white and you don't blend them, it's going to have a very graphic look. You know, meaning that it's going to look a little bit more like a cartoon. If you want a more blended look, you can wipe your brush off on your paper towel, and then your brush will be kind of flat, and you can set your brush so it's halfway on the black, halfway on the white, and lightly brush over it, and you can see how that just blended right in. Another way to do that is you can do white and black at the same time. So I can make my brush a little bit flat and dip it in white and dip it in black and kind of set the white so that it's on the top. And I can paint with both of them. And that can give you a very blended look. And it's kind of nice, actually. That's kind of more what I go for, is a more blended look and less graphic. But to each their own. There is no right or wrong. When you're painting, you know, you want to do something that someone hasn't done before. You don't want it to look like a photo, so we just use a photo for that. So I'm just going over my branches here and just blending them in. Especially when you get to these top ones, you don't want to have stark black, because if it was far away, it would look less vibrant. So I'm just mixing some white and some black over here to make a little bit of a gray. And I'll just come in and add just a little bit of gray. And that's even a little too dark for me. I kind of like the look of if you dip the black and the white in at the same time. Kind of go for that look. Okay, so I've got my branches in here now. The next thing I want to do is I want to start to add in some shadows underneath the branches. So I'm going to clean out my brush in case it's gotten kind of muddy and just kind of start over. And you can take black with a little bit of blue. I think I'll do a little bit of blue in my shadows today. And you want your brush not really watery, and you're going to go underneath your branches, and that's where you're going to add a little shadow. You can do horizontal brush strokes, you can do some vertical brush strokes, but it's just going to be a little bit of a dark area right underneath your branch. And again, you can have it kind of fade a little bit up here at the top. You don't want it so dark. Okay, so you'll add a little shadow underneath your branches, and the next thing we're going to do is we are going to start adding in those lines that you see on aspen trees. And you can use either your 12 round brush that has the point on the end, or you can use your detail brush. So I'm going to go ahead and grab some black paint, and we're going to add horizontal lines onto our aspen tree. So you don't want them to go straight across, because again, we want to have this perspective that we're looking up. So you want these lines to kind of go at an angle. So they're going to be rounded. So it's in the shape of a frown here. So they're going at a little bit of an angle. And again, you want them as random as possible. So this is an aspen tree. It's not a ruler. So maybe there's a really big one down here on the bottom right. And then maybe there's two right next to each other on the left. Maybe there's one just right in the middle. And if you start at the bottom and work your way up, you'll naturally start to run out of paint, and that's perfect, so that the color gets a little bit more subdued and it looks like it's going off into the distance. That's kind of perfect for what you're going for. So you can make them really dramatic if you want, or you can have them really light. That's kind of up to you. You can have one coming off the edge of the canvas on the bottom. If you want to do what looks like eyes on aspen trees, you can start off just kind of making a little dot and make it kind of messy. And then you can drape a line over the top of it. So I can kind of find a spot, do a little messy line, drape a line over the top. You can do some spots where you dip your brush in white and black at the same time. And that can give kind of a nice texture and illusion. Maybe there's just a dot just kind of hanging right off the edge of the canvas. You can go up. If you got too much paint, kind of dab your brush. Work your way up, just adding in some nice little dots. And I would not go too crazy. At some point you want to step back and look at it from far away and then decide if you really want to add more or not. So we're getting near the end here. So if you want to, before you start adding in your leaves, you can add a little bit of color to your tree. So like I was saying before, in nature, there would be lots of light reflecting off the tree and it wouldn't look just plain white and black. So if you didn't add any color at the beginning and you decide you want to now, you could take a little bit of white and a teeny tiny dab of yellow and mix those together. And I'm going to wipe my brush on my paper towel so that I just barely have any paint on my brush. And I'm just going to add maybe a little bit of yellow in because there's some yellow leaves and maybe they're reflecting some kind of yellow onto the tree here. And you can also use your flat brush to do this. So if you want to do some smaller areas, then use your pointed brush. But if you want to do some bigger areas, use your flat brush. And I want it to be subtle, not too strong. You could also do this with a little bit of red, because we're also going to do some red leaves. So you can take white, mix it with a little bit of red. A little bit's going to go a long, long way. But I really like that look of having just a little bit of color in there. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is add in our leaves. So we're going to clean out our pointed brush in our water, dab it on our paper towel, and we are going to start off with some yellow leaves. So if you use just straight cadmium yellow light, your lighter yellow, then you're going to see through it. It's transparent. You're going to see through it and it's going to look green because of the blue behind it. There's nothing wrong with that. You know, there probably are some yellow leaves that have a little bit of green in them. So that's totally personal preference if you want it to look a little bit transparent or not. The brush stroke we're going to be using is we're going to be using this brush kind of like a stamp. And we're going to be kind of setting it down flat. And it makes a nice kind of leaf shape. So I'm not going straight down perpendicular. I'm kind of setting the tip down and then I'm pressing down the side of the brush. So you can start off doing just some yellow leaves. They're going to be thinner down here at the bottom and thicker at the top. If you don't like the transparent look, add in some white. That's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to start off doing just some plain yellow ones. And notice how I'm not going to put them just on the branches because I want this kind of look like it's kind of they're falling. They're falling from the tree. So I'm going to do more yellow at the bottom, and then I'm going to add in more red, orange at the top. So you don't want to keep your brush in the same direction the whole time. You want to turn your brush at different angles. And I'm pressing down hard as I get closer to the top. And then the next cool thing you can do is you can take your brush, load it up with paint. So I'm loading it up with my yellow, white tint here. And then I can dip the very end of the brush in a different color. I'm dipping it in red. And then when you press down, you get leaves that have a different color tip to them. So up here at the top is where I'm going to want more red. And so now you can kind of just go crazy filling it in. So I'm going to fill mine in a lot. And I'll only have it overlap my aspen tree a little bit. Overlapping does make it look more realistic and more interesting, but I don't want to completely cover up my tree. So again, do some where your brush is aimed downwards. And you just want to kind of build it all up. You can have some globs of paint on your brush. Now I'm going to mix a little bit of my yellow and my red together. Get some nice orange paint. I'm going to really start going to town. And I want just a little bit of blue showing through in the background. So you can see it takes quite a lot of paint, and you also want to make some that are going off the edge of the canvas because it's not like it just stops right there. You want the illusion that this picture goes beyond the canvas, not that it's squished into the canvas. I'm adding in some orange. And at the top, I'm really going to go crazy with red. Got red, I've got yellow, I've got thick paint, I've got thin paint. Lots of variation. So I'm going off the edge of the canvas there. And if you fill it in completely, you won't see that kind of blue shining through the background. So you don't want to go too crazy, but pretty full. Do a layer, step back, look at it, see what you think. So up here in the red, I also want to add in a little bit of purple, just to add even more variation. So what you can do is you can mix a little bit of blue into some of your red, or you can also use black to do this too. But I really like the way that looks, with just a little bit of a darker tint to it. And if you have a bigger brush than the size 12, you can use that too to make some really kind of big leaves. So I'm starting to get it filled up to the point where I like it up here at the top. just going to do a little bit more, get a little bit darker, get a nice gradient going at the top here. And now without cleaning my brush, I'm going to keep working my way down. But when you have your colors starting to mix together, they just look more natural. So I'm going to get more into the orange now. Got more orange there in the middle. And then I'm going to do more of the yellow. And as you work your way down, you can start to really make them look like they're kind of falling. And again, kind of trying to keep it random. Maybe there's some small ones. I definitely like to have ones that are different colors down here. Dip in the red, dip in the yellow, dip in your orange. I'll grab a little bit more red paint here. Come over here, can add some falling down here. Some very teeny small ones where I barely touch the canvas. And it sounds like someone's blowing leaves outside, so that's quite fitting, isn't it? And again, a little bit of overlapping does help. So I'm going to do a couple that just kind of go over the branches here. And I'm going to do some that get right up next to the tree so that it looks like it's kind of partly behind the tree. And then I can also you can do some over your tree if you want to too. So at this point, I'm going to wipe my brush off and clean it out so that I can get some brighter yellow. So to do that, I'm going to mix white and my yellow together, because the white is going to make it a little more opaque and it's just going to make it stand out a little bit more. So I want to get some kind of brighter yellows in here. And I can add this even some on top of my yellow or my red up here. And again, step back, see what it looks like. You can go over some if they don't look quite how you want it. And that's pretty much it. So you can keep adding in as many leaves as you'd like. And whenever you're finished, don't forget to sign your painting. And I want to thank you so much for watching my channel and painting along with me today. I enjoyed it and hope that you did too. We'll see you next time.